Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Awakening Dragons. I'm Katara Sky, and today I have the amazing Michelle Hawk with us as a guest. And of course, I'm going to introduce her. Now, Michelle Hawkes began practicing shamanism in 2003 at age 15, and her lineages come from Hungarian and Celtic shamanism. A naturally gifted psychic and intuitive channel, her work with alchemy, shamanic energies, and multiple certifications as a master healer allow her to offer the deepest level of transformational work. She is also a biologist, passionate naturalist, and her work is rooted in a deep reverence for life and the wisdom of Gaia, scientific principles of ecology, environmentalism, and a genuine appreciation and enthusiasm for nature. Hello, Michelle. I know that we're both probably podcasting from the bush and from our sacred lands. How are you today?
Hello, Katara. I'm great. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me to speak to your people. And yes, absolutely. I live out in the forest in the Pacific Northwest. So I am also country living and sometimes intermittent internet. But right now it
That's
seems to
right.
be okay. Yeah.
So I first, I think, heard one of Michelle's talks, I think probably on a Dragon Thunder Summit of last year. So I'm deeply interested and inspired by all her work with dragons as well. But what's really interesting for me is that blend, Michelle, that you have of alchemy, shamanism, and the dragon stuff. And for me, because those are also my lineages, I'm like, oh, all the things I love.
Mhm.
So now you mentioned that you started practicing shamanism at 15. Could you just expand a bit about that? Like, I feel like I've heard you say you've always been a magical kiddo. Now, is that something that was just always with you and then encouraged as well? Or like you became formally training at 15?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. I believe we're all magical kiddos, and we all, as young people, have that natural inclination toward life. And for me, it was very much a love of animals, a love of nature, being outside. And I did, I was drawn toward stories that are like cultural myths. So I was drawn toward indigenous stories of all over the world that were really I have the vocabulary now to say I was interested in animistic philosophy and
Mm.
animistic tradition because that was how I saw the world. I saw the world as everything is alive, everything is connected, and animals can talk, and plants have spirits and can connect with each other. And I just didn't have the vocabulary for that as a young child, but
Mm.
it made sense to me, and I would imagine sending colored light into my dog. My childhood dog was diagnosed with diabetes, and she had some health concerns, so I'd put my hands on her and imagine colored light pouring into her. And now in
Mm.
retrospect, I know I was doing energy healing on my dog as a child. And so when I was 15, I kind of stumbled into meeting some people at who had a massage and Reiki clinic. And so I was like,
Mm.
oh, okay, well, here's a thing about energy healing. This is a thing that people are doing. And they were hosting a shamanic workshop, a shamanic journey workshop. So that's what I attended in 2003 at 15 years old while in high school. And it made so much sense to me. And the vocabulary that they were using, the words they were using, gave me a language for what I was already believing and feeling about the world. So I learned about spirit animals and spirit guides, and learned about journey states and moving through the worlds and how to communicate with spirits. And so that was my first official introduction into shamanic practice. And from there, I was gobbling up whatever teachings and workshops I could and trainings until I met my current and longtime shaman mentor in 2009. So I had about
Wow.
6 years. Yeah, thank you. I had about 6 years of fairly fragmented teaching with, it's now you just Google like shaman near me, and
That's
it's
probably
so
a
much
website.
right, shaman near me. Well, it's funny. I actually just got because I have a website and I have like Google statistics and whatever on my website, I just opened the Google report this morning and I looked at what the search inquiries were that people had been searching for to lead them to my website. And shaman near me had a lot of hits. I'm like, well, that's what people are looking for now. It is so much more prevalent. But back in the early 2000s, that wasn't really a thing. It was much
Mm.
less common. And so I just look at how I happened to stumble into this, and then I followed the breadcrumbs of, oh, this person's doing another teaching or workshop at this place, and then I met someone there, and they're telling me about this other thing. So that's how I was in the beginning of my practice, how I was able to begin again my like very scattered shamanic education and until I met my current mentor in 2009, and I've been working with her since then. So, and of course, in the meantime, I have trained with other teachers as well, and I'm a multi-lineage practitioner. But the beginnings were really just I happened to fall into it, and it made sense to me, so I pursued it.
Mm. Yeah. And that's amazing. And I love hearing how you've actually studied and apprenticed probably with many teachers, practitioners. And I think training, is essential. And that even though probably you would agree that all of us are shamanic in nature, right? We're born and we have these capabilities and gifts, but we need to hone them and train them. But I think training and diligent training and discernment and all of these practices are essential. And I'd love to hear you expand more about it. When I first approached shamanism, I think I was reading one of these old books by Alberto Villoldo. I think he had called it Grow a New Body, or maybe it was One Spirit Medicine. I think he had called it One Spirit Medicine, his first edition. And I remember just feeling chills all over, like, I don't really know what he's talking about, but I feel really drawn to studying this. And the lady that I was staying with, a friend at that time, she's here in Australia, and it was through her that I came through this school here. And next thing you know, 3 months later, I'm enrolled in a shamanic school. And it gave me lots of foundational practices, lots of techniques. And I think I've heard you mention that as well. There's many schools and places that teach you a lot of shamanic techniques. But I always felt like, like needing more deep dive, needing to understand more about cosmology of shamanism and what it means to really be shamanic and find our own ways as well. So what made you, I mean, other than deepening your practice, but what made you expand into studying other lineages? And can you talk a little bit about maybe how training is different and why is that essential to being a superior practitioner?
Yes, I would say masterful practitioner because there are anyone can go take a weekend course in shamanic practice, and I'm not dismissing those. I think they definitely have valuable things to offer, but the difference between taking a shamanic course that is focused on techniques versus going into deep study, both with a guide and teacher, but then also deep study within your own practice and within the context. And I'll explain more what I mean about that. That's what makes mastery. Like shamanism doesn't come from, okay, I can shake a rattle at somebody and
Hmm.
like, beat a drum. That's not shamanism. Shamanism is about the intimate relationships, the intimate and functionally purposeful relationships that we have with spirits and that we have with Gaia, and that we can communicate within these different realms of consciousness and travel within the different realms of consciousness. And so
That's right.
the techniques are helpful to facilitate the actual thing that is working within the spirit realm and working within subtle body energies. But shaking a
Hmm.
rattle isn't the thing. It's a tool for the thing. So I
That's
look at
right.
that and yeah, thank you. I look at the the way that I came into my shamanic practice. Again, I kind of stumbled into it, and I stumbled into technique training. And what I evolved into is a combination of both my own curiosity and my own presence and my own natural inclination to investigate these different aspects of the energetic side of things, but also the guidance and the mentorship that I've had from many teachers and my continuing education over the years. And someone to help guide me, like, okay, these are the questions that you should be asking, and also a masterful practitioner to demonstrate to me and to help me unlock the portals of my own potential through witnessing someone in their mastery and receiving the teaching and the instruction of that. So
Mm.
with shamanism, the other piece that I'm seeing is, there's a lot, particularly in the modern world, and information is becoming more globally accessible. Here you are in Australia, and here I am in the Pacific Northwest United States, and we're having a conversation about shamanism. And yet I'm willing to bet the lineages that we have studied and practiced within, there's a lot of difference, and yet there are some things that are very much the same within that. And this is true of shamanic practice all over the world. There are things within particular cosmologies or within particular cultures that are going to be very unique and very different. And of course, there are universal principles that are going to be the same or very similar across the board as well. And the pieces that really make shamanism come alive and make it actually work, like what is the core of shamanism, is dependent on the context that we live in, meaning the context of our immediate ecosystem, the context of our culture, the context of the food and the beings and the land that we're cohabitating with, because these are the spirits that we have relationships with. Looking at,
Mm.
well, where did shamanism come from? Shamanism came from our animistic worldview, and I say our, meaning indigenous peoples all over the world had an
Yeah.
animistic worldview of the planet and of the local
Mm.
ecosystem. And these, the animistic worldview of, okay, everything is alive, everything has its own intelligence, the elements are alive and something that we can recognize and have relationships with, and communing with our environment. That's where all of this actually came from. It came from having relationships with the aliveness in the world around us, and then translating that and receiving from that, receiving techniques and receiving particular teachings from the plants themselves, from the animals themselves, about how to work with those energies. So I look
Mm.
today at so many shamanic curricula, like Shaman 101 is all
Yeah.
about techniques and not about the context. It's not about how to
Yeah.
cultivate your mediumship and how to form those fundamental relationships with the spirits. It's
Yes.
about, okay, here's the techniques of shamanism without the meat of it, without what actually makes it work. And I know why
Mm.
that is. I really do, because the teaching the intimate relationships takes time, and it takes presence, and it takes and it's going to be different for everybody. That's what makes it challenging to teach that within an online shamanic curriculum. Honestly, it's almost impossible. And there are ways that I have done that. I teach a course called Sacred Ecology, and Katara, which I know you're familiar with because you've heard me talk about it before. But for those of you who don't know, I teach a course called Sacred Ecology that is all about how to work with land and nature spirits. And I teach it online. I do also offer an in-person retreat for people to come experience that. But everything that I teach is guided to help you go out into your local ecosystem and to form these relationships, these intimate working relationships with your local land and nature spirits. So it's different for
Yes.
everybody in the course. I have people all over the world in this course. And so it's different for everyone. And looking at how I was able to do that, well, I was able to do that again through a combination of my own lifelong love of nature. And I'm also a former biologist, a former field biologist. And so I have a lot of experience being outside and being able to work with and study and know intimately nature, and also my own intuitive practice, coupled with the guidance and the mentorship that I've had along the way, has been my recipe for success with that. And having teachers who get it in my corner and helping me ask the right questions and helping me to decipher and be in attunement with the information that I'm receiving has been vitally important in my success as a practitioner and my own mastery as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like
Beautiful.
I
And
got off
thank you
track
for
of your
sharing that.
You're
No,
welcome.
no,
I
no.
don't
I mean, we're just free
question.
flowing. And as
Great.
you're speaking, I'm just, very conscious and aware of, all the beings, on this land. And I have never lived on country or in the bush. In Australia, we say in the bush. I've
Mm,
always lived in the city and been very disconnected from nature. I think, I've always lived in city and did not fall into any of the spiritual stuff at a young age whatsoever, and my
mm,
remembrance has only happened, in the last decade. And so it's very interesting, as soon as I came onto this piece of land, it was like that house fell through, that other thing fell through, and we would have never thought to be living in this random cabin in the bush. And then
mm,
here we are, and it was just this feeling of all the beings and spirits here really welcoming us and saying, "Oh, we need you here." And always just feeling this sense of appreciation of like, oh, we're here, we're actually communicating and talking with the spirits of the land.
mhm.
And interestingly, as I said to Michelle when I was about to set up for recording this podcast earlier, it's like they didn't want me to do it down there, maybe because there's some interference and some humans down there. My partner's in the cabin. And so they wanted me to move over here where we're just really surrounded by all the bush and land. So I know what you're saying about really connecting to local, what's here. And this is the first time ever being in a garden, and it sounds really basic, but the land helps and produces food and you're eating off of it. Like it's such a learning and a lived experience, which is quite different than just reading about it and learning online. So
Mhm.
thank you for sharing that. And so I'm now interested on how your lifelong journey with shamanism and all of these teachings then led you to also have a long relationship, I think, with alchemy and the
Mhm.
hermetics, I guess. Now, I
Yes.
discovered the hermetics almost by accident because I was still searching and expanding different practices. And I met my current mentor and master, who's Qigong master. But really, he's been practicing the Hermetics and alchemy and Qigong for 35 years. And so when he gave me a healing session, I was just like, okay, this is unlike any energy work that I've experienced. And within 1 hour, I'm like, I'm going to come and study with you. Where are you? And I studied with the gentleman for, I think, 20 days straight because it was, that's the format and the transmission of energies. And I understood that actually the Qigong was just the model or the tool in which to share about universal laws and alchemy and the framework of hermetics. So I
Mhm.
wondered when you also began to, I don't know, get exposed to alchemy and how practices interrelate. We spoke about lineages earlier and that interrelationship. So when did that start branching into alchemy? Are they separate practices? How do they feed together? Because it feeds beautifully for me. Like I cannot imagine my worlds without those frameworks together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in my practice, those are my two core lineages, really. I mean, shamanism has been part of my life for over 20 years now, and I find that alchemy weaves in so seamlessly, so beautifully. I began it was almost like sort of discovered that I was working with alchemy. It's like I came into it backwards, and so it
Yeah.
was in, and I'm sure you can relate to this. And if you're tuning in, you can probably relate to this too. It kind of similar to how I kind of discovered that I already had a very shamanic orientation once I started studying it. The similar, or I had a similar thing happen with alchemy, and I think that was in around 2016, 2017 or so. And it was one of those things where it's like, oh, I start like being exposed to actual alchemical teachings, and the response that I have is, well, yeah, I mean, obviously, like this is, already a part of my practice in terms of what I know to be true about universal law and what I know to be true about the cycle of transformation and about how that expresses in the world. And all of that I learned through my shamanic practice. So looking at, well, we're living in a world that is reflective of these laws of transformation that we learn in Hermetic mysticism and then also the Taoist practice of alchemy as well. And and so again, coming in through the door of shamanism, like, all of these mystery schools are foundationed in the same thing. It's looking at the
That's
world
right.
around us. So it's,
Mm.
I say really my biggest teacher in alchemy has been my shamanic practice, honestly.
Wow.
And in terms of working with, again, the cycles of power in the world, and working with the elements, and working with the layers of consciousness, working within the different worlds, working with our different types of consciousness practice. Alchemical meditation is different from pretty much any other kind of meditation except for like shamanic journeys, because it's a very
Mm.
active, focused application of willpower and consciousness versus, for example, like a 0 point meditation, or a like come to stillness, silence type of meditation. Alchemy is all about co-creating with spirit, which is very
Mm.
much part of shamanic practice, is collaboration with spirit. And so
Mm.
for the way that I practice alchemy, and the way that I teach alchemy, is really through the shamanic lens. And because again, for
Mm.
me, they're so deeply interwoven. And I think there are very few places that I have found where alchemical wisdom and teaching diverges from a shamanic type of teaching. And it's in the very like specifics of hermetics, or even like within the astrological component. Like there's a lot of, the alchemists get up into the stars, and shamanism is a little bit more rooted down here on earth. But
Yeah,
other
yeah,
than
yeah.
that, I have found they're really saying exactly the same thing, just in different
Yeah.
language and different
Well,
context.
there's nothing new under the sun, right? Everything's been done. It's just different lens, and it's come to different stories and different cultures. And I think
Mhm.
that's a beauty and appreciation I have as well, like what we're exposed to, what we resonate with, maybe because of our own spiritual lineages and masteries, and what we've dabbled in before in lifetimes past.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And then the
absolutely.
application of those is different, right? So the mysteries themselves, like that which is true will always be true, or that which is true, as long as it is foundationed in this universal truth and divine law, which is the law of love, is going to be true. But the way in which we're applying it, or like you said, the lens that we're viewing it through, or even our like again, it's the context that makes it different, or makes it applicable in a different way. So it's not
Mm.
the mystery schools themselves, as long as they're rooted in these truths of universal law, will always be relevant to our existence.
Yeah. And
Mm.
so when I kind of research alchemy, or I look for more online resources, or even at the local bookstore, let me see what they've got. It feels very theoretical, like not how my teacher teaches, but often when I'm looking just for expanding perspectives, let's call it, everything feels very mental, very mindy, very theoretical. So I wonder, in your teachings, like how does it weave into more of a practical component? Like how do people understand the laws and use them in their practices?
Mhm.
Does that Do your teachings include that practicality and applicability of seeing how the laws actually work for us, how we
Mhm.
actually practice alchemy?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And, I would even expand that to say beyond alchemy, there's a lot of practice within the spiritual realm, or spiritual teachings, that's all very like upper chakra. We live in
Mm.
our collective relationship to a lot of these practices is very focused on the mind and mindset and consciousness, and particularly looking at like, a semi-related school of thought, which is about working with manifestation, for example, is very much about like the mindset and affirmation and visualizing it and thinking really hard about it. And I use that as an example because a lot of people are familiar with like law of attraction,
Yep.
or mindset techniques, right? And there's nothing wrong with those, but it's only a very, very small slice of the pie. And Katara, like you're saying, the embodiment of it and the practical application of it. So within all of my techniques, or not my techniques, all of the things that I'm teaching, and all of the systems and modalities that I mentor and train people in, everything is all about the integration, the embodiment, and the practical application. So I teach a year-long alchemy apprenticeship called I Am Alchemy. It starts in the spring. So we just started a few months ago with a new cohort of students, which is very exciting. And almost every module includes an accompanying movement practice teaching about here's
Mm.
how to work within the body of these particular energies. And here's different styles of movement that induce your body to work with this type of energy. And every teaching also includes here are integration practices. Okay, so go do this. Here's a ritual practice for you to put into action. Here are consciousness practices. Here's a an altar for you to go make in your house. Here's a
Mm.
particular activity for you to do to put this into action and to feel it in your life. And I do that also with shamanic practice as well. Again, it's these teachings and these mysteries, if you can't do anything with them beyond your meditation cushion, like they're not useful to you. And
Oh,
so,
totally, totally. I
right,
always ask this question. I'm like, but so what? Whenever someone's teaching something, I'm like, okay, so what does that matter in my life, and how am I going to use it?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So a mystery school teaching, for example, of like, okay, let's take something from alchemy, right? So wanting to work with a particular planetary correspondence to increase that type of energy in your life. For example, the sun. The sun is
Mhm.
in alchemy. We look at the sun as the planet, even though we know it's a star. In alchemy, it's a planet, the planet of radiance and joy, happiness, like identity, completion, actualization.
Yeah.
And so, okay, it's one thing to like mentally decide, all right, I'm going to be more radiant in my life. And you do your affirmations. I am radiant. I am radiant. I am radiant. Okay, what does that even mean? And you think about radiance and you journal about radiance
Mm.
and like I shine my light. Okay, what does that actually mean though? And then we start to
Yeah.
bring in some of these other correspondences. Okay, so looking at what are the colors and the metals of the sun? The color is yellow, metal is gold. Okay, so you start wearing yellow and gold. Okay, what are the
Mhm.
foods and the herbs of the sun? You start eating those
Mhm.
foods and taking those herbs. Okay, what are the qualities of sun energy? What does it actually feel like in my body? Where's the source of shining my light? Okay, you do solar plexus activation practices. You practice adjusting your posture. What does it actually feel like in my body to emanate radiance? You do different practices to create that feeling. You do cultivation practices in Qigong, for example, and you practice radiating Qi like sunlight. So
That's right.
all of these different things that you do, and then you make a plan. Okay, I'm going to go into a situation. How do I behave as my radiant self? As the full
Mm.
expression of my own solar consciousness? What are the words that I speak? What are the ways that I behave? What are the choices that I make? And then that's how you embody that energy and how you bring more of that into your life by living it into being through your inspired action and your alignment with the mysteries and calibrating to all of those correspondences, because it's very
Mm.
powerful to do. It's very powerful to layer in all of these different frequencies, so then it supports a holistic experience of I am living my own solar radiance.
That's right. I
And
think
it's
that's a
inevitable.
very beautiful, and thank you for your illustrative example. That aligns very much with how I like to explain things, really allowing people to see, touch, feel. It's like, how does that practice come alive? And even this word you use, embody. Like I totally use it the same way you do, right? Like, how do you make it come alive? But I feel like there's a lot of, not misunderstanding per se, but there's a lot of uses of that word embodiment, which is not necessarily this. And they
Mhm.
may think that it's just about movement and coming into our feminine flow. And sure, those are wonderful embodiments as well, but it's not quite that lived expression of whatever it is that you're integrating. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a really beautiful way of illustrating. It's not just a concept. How do we make it come alive? How do we have that lived experience? And I feel that
Absolutely.
that very much aligns with shamanic work, right? Like, it's one thing to say plants have consciousness, you can connect to them. It's another thing when you actually have connected to it and can feel and have that lived knowing and experience then of, that's the teaching. And that
Yeah.
is, no matter how many books you read, It's not going to happen until you cultivate that relationship, isn't it?
Absolutely. Nothing beats a personal experience and a direct teaching, direct relationship.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think that's why, I also studied hypnotherapy just before I studied shamanism, just as techniques. And I actually found the two very interesting as well, because I find that hypnotherapy, or the practice where I'm the facilitator guiding someone else into those places and spaces and dimensions and lives and whatever. And I also find that very empowering because it allows the other person to have that direct experience. They are the ones who remember, they are the ones who say the words and who see and feel, as opposed to sometimes maybe I'm tuning in or I tap in and I feel, oh yeah, it's, that past life and the other thing, right? But if they don't have that expanded awareness yet, if they don't have it in their consciousness, right? Like sometimes it just misses them. So I find that combining techniques, and then for whoever is in front of me, the right thing will be shown. It's really powerful when they experience it. It's so much more powerful than somebody telling you, oh, you're a dragon and you're this and you're going to live this life. It's like, am I? Right? Because I didn't have that insight. I didn't get that knowing. So, not that I'm
Yeah.
saying there's doubt, but it's just many, many times more powerful when you are able to have that connection and insight and information and knowing for yourself. I probably assume you feel similar.
Oh, I do. I completely agree. And, again, that personal experience, but I was actually just having a related conversation with someone right before we got on this call, looking at what it feels like people are really asking for within the spiritual healing realm right now. I think part of that is, again, I'm a huge advocate of, yes, helping people have their own direct transmission personal experiences, but I look at it feels to me like people are very wanting someone else to tell them what they're seeing. Like I have people all the time, even my clients who know better, who know that I don't really do this, ask me, Michelle, what are you seeing? What are you getting? And I think there's an element there of either people not trusting their own guidance or their own attunement and foundation of that, or in the case of someone who just doesn't know how, there's a lack of skill, which is again something we work with for training. But I think there's this other piece around what that actually means for us is if we're having that direct lived experience and that personal knowing, there's a responsibility that comes with that. Like you can't avoid that. That is, oh, I received
Mm,
this transmission that this is what's activating in my life. Oh gosh, versus, oh, well, someone just told me in a reading that they see me as, this, that, and the other. And there's almost this like, I get to keep what is convenient to me and dismiss the rest. And I'm not saying that
yeah.
everyone does that, but I definitely do. I wonder if that is the case. And I have actually seen that in action in some people. And that's, I don't really do readings like that anymore for that reason or for many reasons, but just a musing on again as we're coming into development of our spiritual skills. I'm not exactly sure who's part of your audience, and so all of you out there, maybe you are established practitioners, maybe you're new or aspiring practitioners, maybe you're not a practitioner, but you want these tools for yourself and for your own awakening. No matter where you are, it is a very beautiful thing to come into our own personal relationship with these lineages and with these teachings, and it's not only a responsibility, but it's a very beautiful co-creative invitation that we receive from spirit when we're receiving these transmissions. So I invite you to look into that, particularly if it feels a little bit intimidating to you, or and certainly if you need help with that, there are many teachers out there who support people with it, like myself, and getting to help you ask the right questions and come make sense of these experiences, make sense of the dreams you're having, the visions you're seeing, the sensations in your body, the knowing that just kind of makes sense even though no one ever told you that. So there's
Yep.
a lot of language and context for all of that. And I definitely have benefited from the mentors in my life. And sometimes it just helps to to talk with somebody and they say, no, you're not crazy. Here's the language for that.
Yeah, so we
Yeah.
can assure everyone who's listening, you're definitely not crazy. And if you're attracted to even the name of the podcast, right, Awakening Dragons, for me, it's not just about the dragons, but it's just about awakening the magic, awakening the power of transformation, awakening the awareness of our multidimensional selves, awakening the possibility of these illuminating conversations. Like, I just love to talk about the things that light me up, the things that help me to expand my viewpoints, my perspectives, and the open many rabbit holes to discover.
Absolutely.
So absolutely, I think that it's important to remember that we are having our human experiences. We have probably contracted to have our awakening whenever it is. So we talked, just you mentioned a little bit about really trusting some of these messages that come through for us, and I was really resonating with that as well. There was a time when I would feel, even though I was, starting to be trained in perception and understanding whatever was coming through, it was almost like I was still giving my power away to, well, what's your reading? Like, what are you seeing?
Mhm.
And not owning and fully believing, because I haven't had the long established, trust that what I'm getting is the truth, what I'm getting, serves me as well. And then the other thing is also the power that we really may give, and I'd like to hear your perspective as well, that we give to our teachers. Now, I absolutely believe that everyone's going to benefit from having a mentor, facilitator, coach, whatever you want to call these people, right? To me, it's like a shortcut. If they've already been doing it for 20 years, 30 years, like, yeah, I want to learn from that person. It just helps you get there faster. That's what I believe. And that's why I'm
Mhm.
always in some container, some kind of work, because that's going to help me grow faster. And I'm an
Mhm.
impatient person. Um, but I also observed this relationship between certain teachers. I had to learn it, where I felt like, oh, like he's not seeing that, or they tuned into something and I didn't see it. Is there something wrong with me? And I'm sure it wasn't intentional, but there was this divide between I am teacher, you are student.
Mhm.
And then my current teacher and mentor, and I feel like, oh, he one of the first things he said is everyone who walks into my class is a master. A master is teaching masters. We're just here as equals,
Mhm.
right? And I just thought, and there was such a feeling that came over me of, wow, that feels like truth to me, and a very different perspective. And again, it might have been unconscious in the past. So have you ever encountered that? Like, what do you think of this teacher student relationship?
Good question. You were cutting out a little bit in what you were sharing about that, but I think I got most of it. And if not, just correct me on what I thought I heard. The teacher-student relationship. Um, I think there are important points to everything that I heard you saying. On one hand, I do find it is very helpful and very important to have a um, I'm going to use this word and I'm going to explain what I mean. A hierarchical relationship within that. Because look at what that makes possible. If there's a very clearly defined role, say for example, I'm the student in this situation, I am not responsible for these, the running of the course and the container of care. Like it's not my job. And it can be actually very nourishing, particularly for those of us who are either conditioned or naturally inclined to be caregivers and being very responsible and making sure that everything's going okay, particularly for all of us overachievers and impatient people, right? It can be very natural for us to take on aspects of that role when it's actually not our place to do so. So I
Yeah.
myself, I speak from personal experience of having to, in some cases, really learn how to receive and just be a student and be held
Yes.
in that relationship. And looking at the like it's a personal, in this case, it's a personal hierarchical relationship container of care that you're in. Like, you have a personal relationship with a teacher. They know what's up with you. It's their job to be present for you. It's a one directional care giving relationship. I'm not responsible for listening to them about whatever happened with their feelings and whatever. It's just somewhere that I get to open myself and trust and be in a surrender place to receive whatever teachings, transmissions, etc. In that respect, I think it's actually very important to have those kinds of
Mm.
relationships. And then as the teacher coming from the other side of it, I hold that responsibility very seriously. And I know that, okay, if I have someone coming into my container of care, this is a one directional care relationship. There's zero expectation for anything from my student or my client other than for me to hold them unconditionally and to let them be in a space of their own freedom and exploration with my guidance and with my support to give them the most effective tools and the most effective guidance that I see them needing at that time so that they can have the most full and aligned learning and growth and transformation and healing experiences that are possible for them. And I think within that, I'm speaking first to the hierarchical nature of that relationship as being and
Yep.
how helpful I think that is and how necessary I think that is. And I think that, for to have people walk in and say, you're all masters, we're all equals. Yes, that can also be true. There are, but I do think that there's something to be said for acknowledging the perseverance and the dedication and the discipline and devotion that it takes to actually step into mastery. And I think that acknowledging, like, I see the master in you, I see that you are holding that energy, and I am in your corner to help you make that possible. I think that's very valuable
Yes.
and very validating also for people as well. But where I do disagree is in terms of the casual use, and I'm not saying that this was casual, but I know there are other people using this in a very casual way, the casual use of terms like mastery and
Mm.
and using that equality relationship in an inappropriate way. And there are,
Yes.
and again, I'm not at all saying like that's what you were meaning, but there are people, I recorded a couple of podcast episodes about harm and abuse within spiritual communities and within like medicine communities and I know multiple people who have been in cults, and there
Mm.
are I had a whole flood of people reach out to me after I released those podcast
Yeah.
episodes
Yeah.
saying, oh yeah, I was in a cult, or I had this relationship with my practitioner, it really, really messed me up. And because like, oh, they were, because of all the ways that people become indoctrinated into these very harmful relationships. So I think having, it is a balance, certainly. Like, I don't think that there's no one way is better than the other in terms of we're equals here versus like a hierarchy. I think actually, again, in a one directional relationship of care in a hierarchical personal fashion is helpful because it's supportive in that way, while also seeing the highest potential and nurturing the mastery of our students. And
Yeah.
as a
I think,
student,
yeah.
being held in that way and knowing that my teacher, like, my wish for all of my students and clients is that they outgrow me. I want
Mm.
them to move on because they don't need me anymore, because then that means I will have done my job. And
Yeah.
granted, I do have students who work with me off and on for years. And I've worked with my shaman mentor, like I said, since 2009. So that we're at 15 years now. And like I said, that's an off and on working relationship. And there have been periods where I saw her every week for months and periods where we went months without contact. But we have again evolved the nature of that relationship as well. And now we do approach that much more as equals now after 15 years. But looking
Mm.
at the healthy way to be in relationship with our spiritual teachers is really like, I hold the position of my students like students, and I expect them to be my students because I expect myself to take care of them and to guide them and to hold them as such. And I
Mm.
support them in nurturing their mastery. Does that make sense?
Yes. Totally, totally. And I'm fully in agreement. And I think it's actually very right that you mentioned about structure as well and that one way of care. I think that's important. I think maybe what how you articulated about, it's about the ability to see the mastery within the students or within, whoever is there. And
Mhm.
again, I'm not saying that my previous teacher, whoever I'm referring to, did not see that, but there
Mhm.
was a bit of, maybe my experience of it was a bit of, oh no, you didn't get that information, that's not what's happening. And I'm like, but that's not what my guides are saying. So there's a bit of
Mhm.
that, which can cause a lot of doubt, right, in your continued practice.
Yeah,
And
there is
in
maybe you cut out on that portion because I don't think I heard that. Again, your signal was a little glitchy. So if I can just speak to that for a moment,
Sure,
I
please.
think yeah, I think it's very important to realize again, like we're human. All every single teacher is a human, whether they acknowledge that or
That's
not.
right.
And even the best channels, even the clearest channels, we have our own filter. And I count myself, I if I do say so myself, I'll toot my own horn, beep beep. I am an excellent channel. I am an excellent medium and an excellent and very clear, I have a very clear communication with my spiritual guidance. And also, I don't take for granted for a second that I am going to receive information in exactly the same way that any other person would, my students included. And so
Mm,
I do, I recognize again, also truth is very like multifaceted. Again, we were talking about truth earlier in terms of like the truth of these universal principles and mystery schools. And also, again, the way that those are applied may look completely different. So, what might be true universally coming through one filter is going to come out one flavor, coming through another filter, another channel is going to come out another flavor, but it's still rooted in the same universal truth. So
yes.
I think holding our guidance, I think it's always a good idea to take our guidance with a grain of salt and run it through our own human perception. Just this is just my thoughts about mediumship across the board. Running our spiritual
Mm,
guidance through our own human discernment is always a good idea. And
yeah.
leaving room for acknowledging there might be aspects of this truth that are coming through that channel in perhaps a different way than I received it. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It doesn't mean it's bad. It might just mean
Mm,
that maybe that's the particular way that that person needed to hear it or needed to receive it.
yeah.
And it's
And
also
that
no
flavor
reflection.
of expression, that's well said. It's the flavor of expression, right? So, my current teacher, I think, so he's not really into shamanism. He never studied that, and he's not really into light language. And I know that, we've had different things where we might have talked about light language. And so because it was such a big part of my practices, toning, sounding, using harmonics, blah blah blah, there was just such this reservation of like, oh, I can't tell him that I do that. And it was very interesting because it was only after this big training period I had with him, then he goes, all right, like, I want you to share your flavor, so to speak. And yeah, it was like this fear of like performance, or like, oh my gosh, what if he tells me that this is all ridiculous? And then it puts my years of having worked with that and knowing and trusting and seeing that it's doing something. And so, anyways, the point of sharing that, and actually what happened was he actually did comment and reflect back of, oh no, there's definitely, energy moving and, transmission and stuff going on, but it was just completely not his flavor. It was completely outside of how he expresses. And
Mhm.
so, not that I felt that he knocked it, it was just my own humanness of like, oh, that's not what he does, and I'm scared that it's not the right or not truthful expression. And it really allowed me to come back into, well, that's how it comes through for me. This is my filter, it's my, understanding, and then the current expression. So I really appreciated that. So, and saw that part where he was really just allowing and seeing me, maybe in mastery, maybe in the training of like, there wasn't any, it's not the way, like he didn't shut it down. So I think we're saying similar things, in different ways, But I agree with you about, teachers, mentors, facilitators, space holders, they have a role and it is their duty. And as you say, it's a role that we have to take very seriously. You're not, wanting to worry about, the spiritual growth of your teacher. And that's not the job.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Well, I think we're can't have a podcast called Awakening Dragons without at all touching upon the dragons. So now I know it's a big body of work for you as well. Michelle does dragon initiations, and also channels the Dragon Council.
Dragon
I'm not
Heart
sure if I got
Council.
that right. Dragon Heart Council. So maybe if you'd like to share who's on the Dragon Heart Council, and maybe just a little bit about the dragons, where they can find more dragon work and what's coming up with Michelle.
Sure. Absolutely. Thank you. The Dragonheart Council is let me back up a little bit. So as Katara mentioned, I do work with dragon energies and dragons according to my personal relationship with them. I know everybody has their own version. Speaking of all the flavors of energy, right? We all have our own flavor of how we perceive dragons. And I work with dragons as a class of beings, similar to angels, for example, as a class of beings. And within the class of beings that are dragons, there are these different lineages or clans. And within each clan, there are individual dragons. And some of the dragons that I work with are my own personal dragons. And if you are a dragon person, you probably have your own personal dragon or dragons as well. And I also work with the Sapphire Dragon lineage. This is a lineage of dragons that I have been initiated into, and then I support people in receiving initiations also from the Sapphire Dragon line. And the Dragonheart Council. And the Dragonheart Council is a council of many different dragons from different lineages, including my own personal dragons, the Sapphire Dragon lineage, and also others who have come through me to offer channeled transmissions many, many times. And Katara also mentioned the Dragon Thunder Summit from last year, 2023. I offered a channeled transmission from the Dragonheart Council on that. And I think people can probably still go find the recording of that if they want to. But they also, I have other recordings elsewhere. I have them on my website. If people are interested, you can go find the Dragonheart Council teachings and transmissions, which is a self-study package of various recordings, including integration prompts, ritual practices, etc., on my website. And I would actually love to offer people a discount code if you would like to experience that. And the discount code is Katara 100. So Katara, Katara 100 all together, and you can get $100 off, 100 US dollars off of the Dragonheart Council teachings and transmissions through my website, which is michellehawk.com. My name, michellehawk.com. And so in working with the dragons, let's see, I also just recorded, I'm like, I just talked about this. It was so great. I just recorded my talk for this upcoming Dragon Thunder Summit in July 2024. And I talked about dragon initiation and mediumship. So here's a plug also for that summit. And so, Katara, I imagine you're probably going to be promoting that at some point or have a link
Yeah.
to that. Right. Okay, cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
So you all can go register for that and check out my talk on dragon initiation and mediumship. I was initiated into working with dragons in 2017 in a very dramatic way with my personal dragons. I'll save that story for the recording. I did tell that story very briefly there. And then I was initiated into working with the Sapphire Dragon line in 2019, also in a very dramatic way. Dragon initiations they're no joke, y'all. And there are so many wonderful things about working with dragons. They're very powerful. They're very loving. They're very, very aligned with truth. And this is, I think, something that, we're talking about shamanism and alchemy, and I think dragons fit in with this very well. And as dragons have communicated to me, they are the original alchemists. So we can't talk about alchemy without also talking about dragons. They are creatures and working with creation and transformation. They're primal creator transformer beings. And which is really the nature of alchemy, is creation and transformation. How do we move energy in a way that transports it through a cycle of completion to transform into its highest actualization? We work with death. We work with rebirth. This is all alchemy, but it's also dragons. Dragons are creatures of ultimate truth, and they burn away all that which is not true. So a dragon initiation can and often is at least somewhat uncomfortable. And this is just one of the the factors of working with dragons is big life changes. And I've had I don't even know how many at this point. Many people come to me for a sapphire dragon initiation, or also I support people in initiations with their own personal dragons. And afterwards, it is not uncommon for people to move across the country, end a marriage, get a new job, start a new business, quit their job they hate, some aspect of big life transition as it, in the months following a dragon initiation. And the same has definitely been true for me as well. So if you're interested in more about that, I'm not sure how much time we have here to keep talking about this right now, but you can
Um,
certainly go. I'll just give a brief version. You can definitely go find more on my website, michellehawk.com, and you can look at both the Dragon Heart Council, which, as I mentioned, is the self-guided study practice of receiving transmissions from the Dragon Heart Council, working within the practices, their meditation practices, and different healing techniques, consciousness techniques within that as well. And then, if you are interested in receiving a dragon initiation, I have on there as well the Sapphire Dragon line initiations, but you can also come to me for a personal dragon initiation. I think it is important to note it is not me, the human Michelle, offering the dragon initiation. I'm just there to support. Like we were talking about the role of a teacher. I am there to guide. I
yes.
am there to hold you and help you. And it is the dragons themselves offering the initiations. And what that means is they themselves are coming in to give you particular codes, activating different frequencies within your own energy, your body, your consciousness, so that you come into alignment with them and help anchor their frequencies in human consciousness and the world and become collaborative, co-creative partners with them, dragon, will, and desire, their life path and purpose. And of course, we also receive tremendous benefit from doing that as well. There's a whole host of ways in which working with dragons is very wonderful and beautiful and beneficial for us, but it is definitely something that we are called to do. This is not a like something to be flippant about. And I don't think anyone here would be, but just in case I have to say, I have gotten a few applications from people who are like, interested in
Sounds
that.
cool.
That's cool. Like, also the Sapphire Dragon lineage, they're keepers of the royal codes. So I've had people message me like, ooh, what are the royal codes? I want that. Like, I want that minus the dragons, or even like all of that just sounds really neat. And it's all an ego thing. I'm like, that's not really what it's about. And then they just don't contact me again. So it's not me filtering out, it's the dragons filtering that out. But just again, all of that to say, like, if that's something that you're called to, trust that calling. And you're certainly welcome to reach out to me if that is speaking to you and resonating with you and you want to talk about dragon initiations.
Absolutely. I will definitely be sharing all of Michelle's links. And as Michelle's saying, there's something very dramatic once the dragons come into your life.
Mm.
I mean, I don't think my initiations or my, how I've encountered them now have been dramatic, but overall, when you talked about like now I'm actually just about to move intercontinentally again. Is it astrological? Is it because the dragons are showing up? Like, who knows for sure. But I do feel that life is very different since connection with the dragon, since publicly and very decisively acknowledging that I'm working with them and really feeling that creator and transformation power and that infusion of that energy in all that I be and do now. So I think there's something really special in that, many of us may feel more called to dragon energy, and it's simply amazing just to looking on Facebook how many groups are about the love of dragons and dragon imagery, dragon lore, dragon everything. And so it's actually really interesting.
Mhm.
But I guess when the energy or when the people or the consciousness is ready for that energy to return and to really be present, then it will be there and you might just start hearing more about dragons. And probably, many of my speakers have some shape or form of dragon energy, and that's, what's resonating. It's like, oh, let's have a chat with them. So
Absolutely.
absolutely, I feel, very in resonance with a lot of Michelle's work and all the lineages and how it all fits together. And I feel that she would be an excellent mentor and guide for many of us. So I want to say thank you so much for your work. Thank you so much, for your human self and that commitment to that. I think it's important to also acknowledge the human vessel and all the work we do in order to bring through these beings and these bodies of work.
Mhm. Thank
So,
you.
yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much for that, Michelle, and all that you share. Is there anything else you want to say to the audience before we end? And I will share all the links and where we can reach you and some upcoming courses and things which can be found on your website.
Mhm.
Anything else you'd like to sign off on?
Yeah, thank you, Katara. Thank you so much for having me here. Thank you to all of you who are tuning into this. And if any of this resonates with you, I do invite you to reach out to me through my website, michellehawk.com. And also, I do have a podcast. So if you liked hearing me talk and you would like to hear me talk more, you can find my podcast also. And I'll make sure that that's in the links as well. It's called Shaman Sister Sessions, or on YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify. But yeah, if there's any questions or anyone would like to book a consultation or you want to explore one-on-one mentorship in shamanism, or you're curious about I Am Alchemy for next year, that's the name of the course, or you are interested in dragons, like I said, all of that, you can check that out and find that through my website. And I'm really, really grateful for the opportunity to share this and speak with you. Thank you so much, Qatar. I appreciate your time and your invitation.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.